Phew, that's some rat we got there. Now, how do you begin teaching a rat to begin where he began and end up where he ended up and all that stuff in the middle?
Well, that's an example of programming. A program was employed with regard to this particular rat and several others like him, and the idea was to set up the conditions in such a way that he would never fail, but would always succeed. And what the program consisted of was articulating the various steps in between.
Well, you mean, in other words, the rat was striving his utmost. He was always given the incentives to strive to go up in the elevator, the treadmill, the levers, the doors, whatever it happened to be?
Well, you see, although he started out in the very beginning by going through that little, Moorish arts and going up the stairs, that is not the way the program was taught to him.
I mean, we're talking about setting up favorable conditions that are going to provide success.
That's right. Now, his success is to do all those things you saw him doing. Mm-hmm. But the way in which the sequence of training was not the one that you saw. The sequence of training was the exact opposite. He was started out with the backward part first. The very end thing was taught first, and gradually things were added to this. This exemplifies a backward program. There are actually 4 types of programs. 2 of them are forward programs, and 2 of them are backward programs. And what you just saw is the outcome, the result of one kind of backward programming.
Backward program. You mean starting with the last act and working back one step at a time?
Yes, there are some things that are best learned this way, although when it finally comes out, it starts out with the first one. But the order in which things run themselves off is not necessarily the same as the order in which they are required. Let me give you an example of what happens when you don't do it appropriately.
Okay.
Okay, now, when I was in the hospital, the effort was to teach us how to fall. The thing is if you have crutches and you're going to fall, will the crutches fall under you so that you break your limbs, or will they be knocked out so that you can't pick them up, and so on. So how do you teach people to fall? So they stood, all of us, up against a wall and said, fall. There were mats here. Well, you know what? I didn't learn to fall. I simply couldn't fall. And they said, what are you scared of? And I said, I'm not scared. All my reflexes are working in the opposite direction, and I simply can't do it. So I never learned how to fall, and a lot of the other people there also did not learn how to fall.
Well, now, when I took judo, they did the same thing with us. The first thing we learned was not even falling, but how we were going to land. First, what position do you wind up in at the absolute end of the fall? Then they started with somersaults into the landing. Then they started with standing us up, rolling, falling.
You learned how to fall, right?
And it wasn't just that we were learning how to fall. We were learning not to be afraid of it. I know I've been injured skiing because I try and break a fall. I try and stop a fall. I make myself stiff rather than eliminating the fear, learning how to fall so that when it happens, I know how to do it. Is that what you mean by the backward step?
Well, the backward part is what you learned. You see, what they should have done with us is what they did with you. You look to the successful examples. Mm-hmm. Because what they should have done with us is have us down on the mat first in the, I guess it's a prone position that you're supposed to assume when you have fallen.
Right.
With the 2 crutches out on the side. Then once that is down, hell, I can do that easily. All right, then now get up on your hand and fall. Get up and do this, At this point now, release your crutches, and so on. So that step by step, it's backwards the way you were taught. The complication here is that crutches are added to it, step by step back. And finally, when I stood to the end, I know what the whole sequence is, and I would just fall without fear and do the whole thing the right way because I was taught backwards, which was the right way then.
Right, just as the backwards program, in my case with the judo, was always knowing where I was to end up.
That's right.
That's the first thing I learned is where I wanted to be at the very end.
Exactly, and you were taught, according to the first thing you were taught is where you end up.
Is that maybe because a lot of times what may prevent us from reaching a goal is we're afraid we're not? And this way it eliminates that because we already know that. We already know we can do that. I didn't worry about not being able to fall in judo because I'd fallen.
Well, what happens is that you're using a successful program. We can all fall from our elbow down. Right? That we can all do. We can all then crumple our arms and fall, having done the first one. And gradually, if we just add it this way, well, we can then simply fall standing up. We just go through that which we already know.
Today, let's talk about programs. How do we get where we want to go? The secret of programming is designing favorable conditions to making progress toward a goal, employing, and this is important, the consequences we have identified as important. Now, what about a backward program? Strange term, isn't it? Learning to fall is our example of the first type of backward program. We start close to the goal and work our way back to starting at the beginning. This type of program almost assures success at each step. Success is defined as the accomplishment of the final goal. I have a feeling that this is what is involved in training of our friend the rat. Let's find out. This discussion of backward programming reminds me of how Billy learned this at the table. His mother put on everything the first night except the napkins, and he put the napkins on. The second night, she left everything, put everything on herself except for the forks and the napkins, and he put the two on. Now, is that what we're talking about? Am I right?
That's exactly it. That is a backward program. And with regard to Billy, if you will remember, his mother had some difficulties getting on with him in the past. She didn't know. She couldn't train him. She just couldn't. It turned out she had merely used the wrong programs for him. When she sets up the right program, she does it. Very often when we try to use the wrong program and it doesn't work, we then can state that the child isn't motivated. Now, this kind of backward programming is used, especially in homes for mentally retarded children, to train a child to dress. What they do is they pull the pants all the way up to the very top with only the zipper open. Then the child learns to do the zipper, and look what he did. Then what is done is the pants are then pulled down a little bit further, and he's got to pull them up, and then the zipper. And you just go work all the way back. You can also teach a child to tie shoelaces in exactly the same way. Give him the shoelace, the shoe completely tied with that completely open except for the one last loop. It's all tied except for the last loop.
So you're always giving small feelings of success as well. All right, now is my chance. What about this rat? What about this Rodent D. Lee character?
Oh, now I can tell.
Now I want to know the truth about this rat.
Okay. Well, as you saw, the way his behavior ran itself off. First he ran through an arch, then up a winding staircase, then across a walk, over a drawbridge, then a ladder. He pulled himself across on a little handcart, then went up again, struck middle C, went through a tunnel, went to an elevator, pulled, and got down to the bottom and pressed the lever and got his food. Okay, now just reverse that. That's the order of training. First, he was given free food way down below. Then he was trained, we call this shaping, to press the lever to get the food. Then once that behavior was well acquired, man, he could just really do it. Then that having been done, he was put into that little elevator way up on top. And now he looks down around the elevator, and there's that lever down there. How do we get there?
So he's got to find a way to get there.
So then he learns the shape to pull on the latch. Then once he's got that mastered, now he's then put in front of the tunnel. And there is that good old elevator. So he goes through the tunnel, into the elevator, presses down, and you keep on working all the way down, backwards. And finally, the whole thing reels itself off in the exact opposite way. Now, this kind of sequence for training is what is known as a backward program. It's one of two types of backwards programming. This is a rather simple program. You can actually develop way more complex backward programs. But this one, it turned out that Rodent E. Lee performed before the crowned heads of Arizona at the Arizona State Fair, And what happened was that one of the rodent Elise, the original rodent Elise, he came from Virginia.
Oh, you mean we had a series of generations here?
Oh, that's right.
Okay.
Rodent Elise came from Virginia with Art Bachrach, who brought him down from Virginia to Arizona. And what happened is he caught cold in the air-conditioned buildings of Arizona and died.
Oh, dear.
Oh, dear. And so what happened was that quite rapidly, because that Arizona State Fair was right around the corner, 5 freshmen quickly trained 5 more rodent Elise, or are they rodents Elise? I don't know which they are, trained them to go through with it.
Well, I suppose if that was the only way I could get my dinner, I suppose I'd go through the same sequence eventually.
Absolutely. That's exactly what you would do.
Offhand, training a rat to do all those tricks may not promise much for the benefit of mankind. But this type of backward program has many applications. If a particular goal is the result of a whole sequence of steps, might it not be possible to program starting with the final step and working backward? It looks like fun, too, because we are accomplishing the goal every time we try. Well, enough about this type of backward program. Dr. Goldiamond mentioned that there is another. Any guesses as to what it is? You mentioned a little while ago that there were 2 types of backward programming. We've already discussed one. The judo was one of the examples. Fall first, then backwards. Now, what's the other? What else is there?
In the other type, you provide that goal, which is way, way at the end of the horizon, at the very first steps, the second step, the third step, and the fourth step. You see, the first type of program was the goal, namely the food, the outcome, that critical consequence, was not provided until the rat ran through the whole chain.
Whole thing.
Yeah. In this kind of case, it's though the food is provided at the end of every step, but the steps are made progressively more complicated towards the end. Let me give you an example.
Yeah.
I was on the staff of the Institute of Design, which used to be known as the old Bauhaus in Germany. And this was a school which trained architects, furniture designers, a variety of things. It was a kind of way out school for its time. Now, in architecture, because the buildings will expand and contract, that is, the metal in it, and so this involves some knowledge of these coefficients. It involves some knowledge of math. So the architecture students typically will start out with math, with physics, and keep on going on and on and on until finally maybe in their 5th year they'll get to do some architecture and get to design some houses, by which time most of them have fallen by the wayside. They've come there to build, and they're not getting it. Where is it? Okay, what was done at the Institute of Design, this goal way at the end, was put there immediately. That is, you've got to design a house immediately. Well, what sort of house could a kid straight out of high school design? Well, he was asked to design a dwelling in a tropical rainforest. Well, Tahiti, hula skirt,
grass.
Right, and the like. And so they hunted that up. It took them only a week to find out all their requirements. And they made little model houses. Some of them were real ingenious, where the roofs came off to let the sun in after the rains. And so that's the first thing to design. And then they discussed these, and these were critiqued the way architectural drawings are. That's the first one. The second one was to design a house in Alaska or northern Canada, given the kind of reindeer economy that some of the people there have. And so they had to learn more about this, and they finally designed different kinds of houses using skins and bones, and there are no trees there. And so they put those together, and these were critiqued. Then next thing was a small A-frame. And then the next thing after that was to design a small house. And now at this point they're designing the small house. Boy, the morale was high. Now they're discovering there are coefficients of expansion and contraction and I-beams and things of this kind. So now they're ready to take other courses about physics and engineering and math. Now they're ready to do it.
Instead of shoving it all down their throats with no end besides this sort of vision of Buckingham Palace way in the background, you teach them enough to build an outhouse, and then you teach them enough to build something a little bigger.
That's
so
right.
that they always have this feeling like, hey, there has been no outhouse like any outhouse like this outhouse that I just did.
Yeah.
This second type of backward program proceeds in orderly steps, which increase gradually in difficulty and complexity. It is backward in the sense that at each step, the critical consequence, the goal, is provided. Maybe it's the opportunity to design a dwelling or getting an education, doing lessons. This type of backward programming is very strong, and you can see how discouragement is avoided. But now it's time for forward programs. Okay, Dr. Goldman, I now have you trapped. I am a cigarette smoker. I have the typical smoker's problem in that I'd like to quit, but I'm scared I won't be able to, and I postpone it so that I'm not a continual quitter. For a backwards program, I just have to be cold turkey. Now, how, using one of your methods, can I quit smoking?
Well, in the case of stopping smoking or a variety of things of this kind, it's almost like learning how to read. You know, first one has to read a few letters and then more and more and more.
Start with the alphabet.
That's right. You start with something like that. You start out with a simpler. This is a kind of forward program, like a curriculum. So what we would have to do would be to set up a curriculum for you.
Okay.
Again, this is a forward program.
This is a forward program.
What we would have you do is to first keep records of the cigarettes you smoke, each cigarette, the conditions under which you smoke, and so on. So we then get a picture of where smoking fits into your life, what are the various things it does for you, and then try to construct other repertoires which do those things for you.
Talking about when I do smoke and those conditions, also, since we were talking about remembering your successes, when do I not smoke? So what's the first thing I do as a smoker to try and go about it?
Okay, now, the first thing to do is to keep a kind of record by the week in which you add them all up by the end of the week to see where they are by the end of, not number per day, but add them up per week. So that's the first thing. So we have a kind of weekly record. Or we can have a daily record, but in which every day is added to every other. So the record goes like this. And, with each addition, it just piled up on top of the other. So that's the first thing we do with regard to, just the number you smoke. Now, when you view that, if you're smoking, let's say, 2 packs a day, or say 1 pack a day, you smoke what? About 1 pack a day?
Pack a day.
A pack a day. So that's about 140 a week. Okay?
Looks awfully grim when you look at it that way.
Well, it's 140 a week. That's what you do.
Okay, so how do I start getting it to 139 and
Well,
138?
you see, now what we want to do then is to look at your records, and we're sort of going to be chicken about this. We're not going to take the hard tasks
That's
first.
me.
Oh, we should all do this. We work with the grain, not against it.
Okay.
Okay, so we're going to try the things which are easiest. For example, if I can cut out, say, or you can cut out, say, 1 cigarette a day, you've got 140 one week, and the next week it's 133. That's a drop. It's a discernible drop. Okay, and then we can find out other conditions which you might do, other things, and so on. So let's pretend we have the records, but we don't. How do you start off the day? When is your first cigarette in the day?
Well, having moved about the first 5 minutes of the day totally by radar, it's when I get out of the shower, after I've plugged in the coffee and run around opening the drapes, then I sit down at the makeup table, look at my face and think, oh, God, and then I reach for the cigarette and I smoke while I'm putting on the makeup.
Okay, when do you brush your teeth?
Probably after I've finished with the makeup, because then
After you've had your cigarette. How come you don't smoke your cigarette after you've brushed your teeth?
Well, then it seems sort of irreverent, because you've just brushed your teeth.
It sort of
Kills
makes
off
you
the
feel
toothpaste.
dirty. Yeah, that nice clean.
Yes, that pure feeling.
Yes, that nice clean toothpaste taste. Okay. So what we'll do is, we'll say to you, smoke to your heart's content in the morning. You like to smoke? Smoke. Be my guest. You have those cigarettes there when you're doing your makeup? Well, this is part of making yourself up, getting prepared for the day, right? You're also going to be making your teeth up, won't you? Like this.
Uh-huh.
You know, look at your teeth. You want them clean?
Pretty smile, all that.
Pretty smile and all that. That's right. So that's part of the makeup. So incorporate that into the makeup routine, and then have your cigarette.
Uh-huh. So make that first so that probably the cigarette after the teeth brushing will be postponed.
Well, you're not going to do
it. Kill it off.
You're not going to do it. You're not going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
After the smoking, it just ruins that nice taste. After the toothbrush, it ruins that nice taste in your mouth.
Uh-huh.
Before it, you can sort of sully your mouth and do this.
Okay, well, let me...
So that cuts out one a day.
One a day.
That'll cut out one a day. And that'll hold you, I suspect, through breakfast until you have your coffee.
Okay, we're getting a little short on time, so let me just make one quick point, and you
Yeah.
can just say yes or no. Now, then, since I like those cigarettes when I'm drinking the coffee,
and who
would
doesn't?
it be good
Who
to
doesn't?
knock out that coffee and say go to milk? Because I never smoke when I'm drinking
Well,
milk.
the thing to do is to find out those conditions under which you don't. Some people do not drink after certain juices and the like. In your case, you don't drink coffee after milk. I'm sorry, you don't smoke.
Milk.
You don't.
After I drink milk.
Yeah. In your case, you don't smoke after milk. So what you should do is to try to take more of that cow juice instead of the coffee, and that's fine. But as long as you're having the coffee, we're not going to disturb that one, because that's a toughie to break. People are always interested in overcoming the tough hurdle first, because if they can overcome the tough ones, they can also handle the easy ones, they think.
Not so.
Step by step, we start out with that which is easiest to do.
Okay.
And so which are the cigarettes which are expendable?
If the goal is not immediately within grasp, as in the backward programs, a forward program is called for. A first type involves gradually working our way to the goal, step by step by step. In this type of a program, we try to build in consequences and may even resort to introducing extrinsic consequences to maintain progress. For the heavy smoker, there are a variety of intrinsic consequences: easier breathing, saving money by not buying so many cigarettes, or simply tasting the morning orange juice for a change. The smoker, too, must inventory his strengths at the starting point. He checks to discover when and where doesn't he smoke. The most important thing to remember and to plan for in these programs is to build in consequences along the way. Maintain your progress. Backsliding may be the result of trying too big a step, or it may occur because there was no consequence built in. There is also something to watch for in the second type of forward program. The differences are interesting.
Now, how does the other type of forward program differ from the step-by-step program that we just talked about?
Well, this you might call a stage-by-stage program. That's the second kind. The classroom or the school is an example where you move from one level to another, to another, to another. This is going forward. An example in rehabilitation would be teaching people to transfer. Transfer refers to moving to and from a wheelchair and back and forth when they can't walk. So you transfer from one place to the other. Well, you start out with the easiest one, that's getting from bed into the wheelchair. And the reason you start out with a bed is because you can crank the bed up or down or push the button to get it up or down till it's exactly level, and then you learn that. Now, once you learn that, it might be, the distances might be spread apart a little bit, and you learn to use a transfer board or whatever else is involved. At some later stage, then, you might learn to transfer from the wheelchair into a car and back again. Now, the purpose of transferring the wheelchair to the car is to teach you this, but that's a more advanced stage, and very often rehabilitation centers and institutes will throw in, at this point, an extrinsic consequence, namely getting to the ballet or going to a movie, going on an out trip. You're allowed to do this if you know how to do this kind of transfer.
The final type of program, the stage-by-stage forward program, is employed when we can't build an intrinsic consequence at each step, and when the program involves a variety of types of behaviors, each to be mastered separately. Extrinsic consequences must be used. Money may be useful, but we can also provide consequences which are important to the individual directly. Major sub-goals may be set up at each stage, as in the example of learning to transfer. The increased mobility resulting from the accomplishment of each stage opens up a variety of consequences not previously available. In deciding on which type of program to use, answering the questions on goals, present strengths, and consequences will give us a good idea of which are applicable. If the choice is between a forward or backward program, the backward is the program of choice, because intrinsic consequences are provided frequently, thereby maintaining progress.
It would take, for instance, in my acting. I never gave any thought of anything of being an actor. I never thought about going into theater and doing Othello of all things. And, you know, that was a challenge to me, a challenge as far as being able to do one of the greatest plays ever wrote, being able to change my personality and be somebody else, and make it believable to the audience, make them believe that I actually was Othello.
Excuse me. Well, you certainly didn't start out that way. You programmed yourself. You wanted to be an actor. You wanted to assume different roles. You want to be able to behave as though you were somebody else entirely, and pick up his manner, in terms of what Shakespeare intended the person to be. Okay, how'd you start out on that?
Into acting?
No, in terms of learning this kind of thing.
Oh, in terms of Shakespeare, dealing with those. Well, I didn't know anything about Othello.
Yeah.
Number one, I had heard about the play. I never saw it be done. So first thing I did, I got the book, and I went to the Resource Skills Center in Kennedy King College, and I started listening to the records. Number one, I want not to pattern myself. Laurence Olivier album was available, but for the voice quality, what type of voice were they using? You know, when they speak in their lower tones, and we'll go way down deep.
So what you were looking then as somebody who had successfully done the job, as judged by the fact that he was knighted and a few other things, and you decided you would learn from his behaviors what it was that you would be required to do, and you listened and tried to move your way up that. Yeah, that's very good.
Well, that's the way I attacked it.
Yeah.
And after a while, the record, it started to hamper me. After about a month, it really started to, to hamper me. I said, well, I don't need this any longer. I've developed a voice quality. Now I got to work with the character himself. And in portraying the character itself, it dealt in a lot of reading outside the play as far as dealing with the Moors to find out what type of people the Moors were.
Then must you speak of one that loved not wisely, but too well, of one not easily jealous, but being wroth, perplexed in the extreme, of one whose hand, like a based Indian, threw a pearl away, richer than all his tribes, albeit unuse it to the melting mood, set you down this. Say besides, where an Aleppo once, where a malignant and a turbaned Turk beat a Venetian and traduced the state. I took by the throat that circumcised dog, and I smoked him thus.